Excuse me. Again, thanks in advance for the grace, everybody, as I deal with this voice issue. So I will try to be brief. Just to quickly set the stage. One about myself. I'm born and bred in Birmingham. I am hyper passionate about this place. Everything that I can think of in terms of my involvement with the ecosystem, technology, innovation, et cetera. A lot of it revolves around Birmingham and the sacred ground that we walk on, and hopefully using Birmingham as a platform to elevate others. Just a little bit about me. Uh, I originally wanted to go and become an architect. I attended Auburn University. My entire life, I had intended to be an architect and almost flunked out of college because that was not what I needed to do full time. And I was stubborn enough to find myself in the computer lab day in and day out until it closed. And that's when I taught myself how to code. And I use that term loosely. I learned enough just to break it and get it to bend to my will. Long story short, I launched some online initiatives, and once a kid in college starts making a little bit of money, that's all it took. I was off to the races, and my entire professional career pivoted. So I left college early, decided to do this full time. Much to my mom's relief, I did not completely throw my life away. I had a series of fortunate events where people kind of gave me the foundation and the structure that I needed that I did not get in college. And fast forward, I did economic development for about 2 years after leaving technology on the development side. And then in 2017, I was tapped to run this organization, Tech Birmingham. And we're really just a technology association for the region, for the metro area. And so, that's the professional aspect. But there's also the aspect about, just really my passion for this place. And, I was talking with Nia, and she provided me the opportunity to kind of share a little bit about, the city's role in civil rights, the state's role in civil rights, and how it ties into our future economic prospects, not just in Birmingham, but honestly, globally throughout the diaspora. And I was fortunate to give a talk in Austin at South by. And I was invited by a mutual friend to talk about the connection between the civil rights movement and technology, which, when it was first given to me, I truly did not see that intersection. But I'm incredibly grateful for that prompting because it's really informed and encouraged my thinking around how just we collectively not just survive all of these changes, but thrive in it as well. And long story short, I realized that the path forward in a lot of ways we can find it by looking back. What do I mean by that practically? Well, if you examine the Montgomery bus boycott, started um, basically with them recognizing and acting on a few things. One, they looked at something within the larger civil rights movement, but that was manageable. And obviously, this was transportation, right? You can't boil the entire ocean. And so, transportation was their opening salvo, if you will. They focused on that. They also recognized their value. And they recognized that Black folks in Montgomery made up 75, maybe 80% of revenue and ridership. And they used that. And they didn't necessarily boycott infrastructure, which was one of my key takeaways. They didn't boycott interstates, they didn't block roads and passages, but they used and leveraged existing infrastructure to move value. They recognized what their true value was and then created these alternative economies to move value into their hands, into things that were value aligned. And then they created the existing infrastructure to support that. So obviously, if people are not taking the bus, they are they're walking more. And so they had shoe drives. I didn't even realize this until I looked into it. They did shoe drives to make sure that people had shoes because they were going to wear out quicker. The families that were fortunate enough to have private cars, they turned those into taxi and jitney cabs. And so they started providing rides that way. They had an entire apparatus that formed to support this transfer of wealth and value. And then one of the takeaways, which I think is missing in a lot of modern movements, is just longevity. They committed to the long haul. That boycott lasted over 400 days. And so, I think about those principles, and then I ask myself, well, is that practical? Could we do something like that in today's time? And I think we have overwhelming examples of that, of um, transformative initiatives, businesses that sit at that intersection between, civil rights and social innovation, technology. I think about Airbnb, probably one of the best examples of it. They clearly recognize that people value not necessarily staying in a hotel, but just having a safe and a comfortable place to lay somebody's head down at night. And they use that and existing infrastructure to create an alternative marketplace, one that is globally competitive with hotels now. Same thing with Airbnb and Lyft and all of these other transit networks and carriers. They don't own any cars, they don't own taxi cabs, but they identify value and use the existing infrastructure to create new and alternative marketplaces. And so that's something that I'm using almost as a North Star as it relates to one, my role at Tech Birmingham. I happen to serve as a board member with BCRI. We're in the middle of this process now of envisioning what the next 30 plus years of the Institute will be. We're coming up on that anniversary. And so we have an opportunity to say, well, the fight in the past, while still relevant, will look a lot different going and will look a lot different in the future. And what is the Institute's role in facilitating that? I think we have to start considering civil digital rights. Obviously, there are stories of people who have gone to jail because of AI technology misidentified them, facial recognition technology misidentified them. There are people who are sitting in jail because they were wrongly accused, and AI tools that are being used in courtrooms basically said that this person has a high chance of recidivism. So don't let them out. So all of these things that are going on, I think the Institute has a unique role in that. And on the economic side, I think about situations and opportunities. Um, it comes to mind this quote, and I'm sure we've all heard it, but the people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution as well. And so, what does it look like for us to give those folks who are already intimately familiar with their neighborhoods and their communities the tools to empower them to also solve for those challenges and to benefit collectively by doing so? I think about people like Song Laron, if you're familiar with him, his startup. He's a co-founder of a barbershop management platform called Squire that is just experiencing stratospheric growth right now. And they basically just took technology and innovation to where the value already existed in the communities and the sacred spaces of barbershops. And they found a tremendous success that way. I think about Gavin Baum Blake, who has a program called City Detect. It's a startup. And he realized that a lot of neighborhoods are negatively impacted by blight, whether that is graffiti, overgrown lots, dilapidated structures, on and on. And cities are often strapped for resources. Those properties become a drain on nearby areas. And it's very responsive. By the time it reaches somebody's desk at City Hall, it's probably already incredibly tax delinquent. blighted structure, et cetera, et cetera. And so he recognized that cities did not have the resources for proper code enforcement to send somebody down every street, every alley, making sure that these, blighted properties didn't exist. But he realized that the city, in a lot of ways, already sends people out to do that. That's public works. And so, literally, their first iteration was just coming up with a GoPro camera, putting that on street sweepers and garbage trucks, knowing that those trucks, those vehicles had to go down every single street. And every single alley, and they created AI and vision technology, video technology that was able to identify, for instance, overgrown lots. The system knows that this property, when we last drove by, only had grass up to here, now it's up to here, or graffiti is here. They have vision recognition technology that can identify that. They have algorithms that can categorize the most pressing needs and issues. And so this is something as simple as bringing technology and innovation to where the value already exists. And just because a house might be blighted or a neighborhood is suffering from it doesn't mean that the value, that the people don't deserve great resources, that the value isn't there. And so he just brought technology and innovation to those neighborhoods. And so those are the things that I'm keeping in mind. And we're starting to kind of build out as we ask ourselves, what is the role of the Institute? What is the role of the entire Civil Rights District? Again, I want to just thank Nia and everybody who's involved in coming down and taking a tour of it. Because I think Birmingham in this state of Alabama, has a unique role to play as we kind of figure out what does it look like for us to move together collectively and as a community in the future. And the last thing I'll say, Nia, more than happy to turn it over to you if you wish me to direct it to Barry, but he is eminently qualified. I consider him not just a historian. He's a lifelong educator, but in a lot of ways, I think the title griot can accurately be described. He is a keeper of our traditions, of our stories, and he has an in-depth knowledge about the role that Birmingham has played, and in particular, probably germane to tonight's conversation, the role that students played in the civil rights movement. And I like Barry's proximity to this, and appreciate his work because he allows us to change the fact that people, I like to say that people are more familiar with Birmingham's tragedies than they are the city's triumphs. And he brings both to light, and I think one side has been missing for far too long, and that people are not familiar with the fact that what happened here directly led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and what happened in Montgomery and Selma directly led to the Voting Rights Act of 65. And when I'm fortunate enough to talk to international folks, whether it is in Northern Ireland, whether they are from South Africa, whenever they talk about their issues, obviously Northern Ireland and the troubles in that period, apartheid in South Africa, so many of them reference Birmingham in Alabama as a source of inspiration, as a model that they use when plotting and planning their own efforts of resistance. And they knew that if we were able to start to break the back of Jim Crow here, that they were able to make progress, and in South Africa's case, break the back of apartheid. So anyway, all that said, so Barry brings those stories to life in a way that I am, one, not qualified, but just could not articulate in such an impactful and a passionate way that Barry can. So Nia, I'll turn it over to you, or I'll hand it over to Barry, but
turn it directly to Barry, Dion. Thank you.
awesome. Barry, brother, thank you again for your time for this and for the work that you do, not just for the Institute, but for the city. I'll turn it over to you, my friend. I think, are you,
Oh, Barry, you're
there we go.
muted.
You're muted, Barry. Barry, you're muted.
I
There
was
you go.
seeking to unmute myself, but the thing was blocking me from doing that. Okay. Good evening, and Dion, you know my affection for you and my admiration for you, and I'm not going to take their time by sharing it, but let me just say thank you, brother. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we're gonna make you a host here.
Okay.
One moment.
While you're doing that, I'll say that Dion mentioned that there are many narratives that weave together Birmingham's transformational place in American history. And I'm just going to share briefly one of those narratives with you this evening. And let's see if I can get this. And here we go. We can get it. All right. If this is working the way I want it to, you should be looking down a hill. Somebody nod and say, yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
Great. All right. The hill you're looking at right now is a place called Center Street in Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham, Alabama was founded in 1871 because of the mineral wealth that the city possessed. The city is the only place on the face of the earth where you can find naturally occurring in large amounts, closely located to one another, the three major ingredients to the production of steel. That would be limestone, iron ore, and coal. That brought in investments from Pittsburgh and U.S. Steel, and Birmingham quickly by 1910 becomes the largest industrial center in the former Confederacy. And because of this steel, they refer to Birmingham as the Pittsburgh of the South. You're going to have people that are going to flood into Birmingham. When Birmingham is founded in 1871, that's a stone's throw historically from 1865, when more than 4 million people breathed free air for the first time. And so these people, as they breathed this free air, they also had to deal with people that didn't want them to. They had to deal with things like the Black Codes. They had to deal with things like race riots. And they found a city like Birmingham where they wouldn't have to deal with tenant farming and sharecropping and stay laws, where they could go and work in an industrial center. And so these people flooded into this city in such great numbers that historically Birmingham was said to grow overnight as if by magic, giving Birmingham its more enduring nickname, the Magic City. When we begin to look at this Magic City, we look at the idea that these people create a life for themselves. Birmingham is not legally segregated until 1921. But after Birmingham does become segregated, just about everything is segregated. The reason we're looking at this street is that Birmingham's Black community made up about 43% of the population, but they were only allowed 11% of the residential territory. This street is an example of that. On this street that you're looking at right now, I'm moving my cursor around to show you what is the western side of this street. And now I'm moving to show you what is the eastern side of this street. On the eastern side of this street, by law, Black people could live and own residences. On the western side of this street, white people by law could own and live in residences. The problem that we have here is white supremacy dictated that living this close to Black people, for those who were white supremacists, this wasn't something that was acceptable. And so there were a lot of homes on this side of the street that were empty. There were plots of land that were not being developed because of its proximity to the Black community. Going back to this idea that Black people were 43% of the population, but living in 11% of the residential territory, these empty homes and these vacant lots are going to be like somebody is torturing you constantly because there's this property here. So let's turn our attention to there we go. Pardon that. Let's turn our attention to this home in particular. In 1949, a woman by the name of Mary Means Monk and her husband, Monroe Monk, were looking for a place to live. This plot of land was empty. There's nothing here. She wanted to move and build a house here, but the law prohibited her from doing so. So she hired an attorney, and the attorney sued Birmingham in the Monk case in 1949. This attorney is an NAACP attorney by the name of Arthur Davis Shores. Now, Arthur Shores doesn't take on the most segregated city in America by himself. He brings in another NAACP attorney by the name of Thurgood Marshall. The two of them together are going to, with the law, force Birmingham to allow its citizens to live anywhere that they are able to. And with that, Mary Means Monk has a house constructed right on this site. She moves in on December 18th, 1949. 72 hours later, that brand new house was bombed. Mary Means Monk was not killed, but she was also not intimidated. She repaired her house and she moved right back into it. No sooner than she moved back into her house was bombed again. Mary Means Monk, being Mary Means Monk, she wasn't going to be run away. This time she has her house built with a brick exterior, the way it looks today. And she continues to live there. Now, when we think of what's going on here, her home has been bombed once, twice, and it's going to be bombed a third time. But the thing is by the time her house is bombed that third time, other people in the community, this community that's bursting at the seams for a place to live, they're going to start feeling like if she can do it, we can do it. And as Black businessmen like John Drew started to purchase property on this side of the street to even help people to integrate this neighborhood, the backlash is going to come from Namrisha, it's going to come from the Knights of the White Camellia, it's going to come from the Ku Klux Klan, it's going to come from the National States Rights Party. And what's going to happen is this corridor that we're looking at is going to experience over 50 unsolved bombings. Here, we have a Catholic church. This church is Our Lady Queen of the Universe. You might say, well, what about a church? Well, the Catholic Church inserts itself in Birmingham's segregation by building a hospital that will treat people without regards to the color of their skin. And even more, they're going to open a school that's going to educate students on an equal basis. These things are not going to be tolerated. So this church is targeted. And a device is set next to this church that was so powerful that the Birmingham Bomb Squad, with all of its experience, could not defuse this. They had to bring in the Alabama National Guard to remove the ordnance that was placed next to this church. Now, when we consider this idea of, and I'm driving and I might swerve a little bit, but I promise you I'm not inebriated. But when we consider this reign of terror that goes on here, we find ourselves at Arthur Shores' home. When we get to Arthur Shores' home, when the Birmingham City School System is integrated in 1963, it triggers a group of Klansmen known as the Cahaba River Boys. These Cahaba River Boys get this designation due to the idea that when they went to Klan meetings, if they thought that the Klan was too soft in their plans, They would leave that Klan meeting and reassemble themselves under a bridge that spanned the Cahaba River. They reassembled themselves under that bridge and they planned to put a bomb, a devastating bomb, next to the 16th Street Baptist Church that would detonate on September 15th and take the lives of 4 little girls there. Arthur Shores' home was bombed as well because the reason they bombed that church is because the schools were integrated. And they thought that Arthur Shores, being an attorney, he was the one that had done it. So they bombed his house twice. If you look right here by the living room, you can see where the bricks have been disturbed and had to be refashioned. You can see that scar that this house has. In this bombing, Arthur Shores' wife, Theodora, was hospitalized. When we look here in this corner, Fred Shuttlesworth, a religious, spiritual, civil rights leader in Birmingham, who formed an organization called the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, because the NAACP in Alabama had been outlawed. It had been outlawed because of the Montgomery bus boycott and because Arthur Shores and Thurgood Marshall were successful in integrating the University of Alabama. Well, Fred Shuttlesworth creates the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. And when Arthur Shores' house is bombed the second time, hundreds of people come out and they don't want to be nonviolent. They want to express their anger and their frustration with these repeated bombings and this oppression that they were living with. But Fred Shuttlesworth stood in this corner and reminded them of why they started this movement and reminded them of the idea of nonviolent passive resistance. While Shuttlesworth is doing this, a Klansman takes a shot at Shuttlesworth and misses and strikes a 21-year-old veteran by the name of John Coley right in this street corner. And John Coley died of those injuries. Miraculously, he was the only person to die on this corridor with more than 50 people's homes being bombed. I'm going to go across here, and as I go across this bridge ahead of us, I want you to understand that this bridge is a very powerful part of this narrative. This bridge is duplicated in many places around our country. As you had these civil rights leaders, these burgeoning civil rights leaders fighting against segregation, Bull Connor is going to step in and he's going to use his influence as the Commissioner of Public Safety to get the interstate run straight through this community, to divide it. And this bridge today reminds us of the power of the state when it is used in a very deleterious fashion. But as we come across this bridge, I'm going to stop right here because I want to have questions, but I want you to look at what I call the most interesting street corner in Birmingham, Alabama. And that street corner is right here. You see, this house belonged to a man named Frank Davis. This house belonged to a man named J.E. Monteith. J.E. Monteith was a Ku Klux Klansman who would boast about whose house had been bombed. They had a sense of impunity. After you do something 50 times and you're not punished for it, you really don't expect punishment. Well, him bragging like that and the police doing nothing like that prompted Frank Davis to pull together a group of concerned citizens who used a civil defense radio frequency. And they also used their own vehicles and their own weapons to create an ad hoc police force that would monitor this area and prevent these bombings from continuing. While this is going on, they are literally taking their lives in their hands. They're going out night after night, encountering the Ku Klux Klan face to face, gun to gun, street to street, blow to blow. Frank Davis had a daughter, and his daughter was terrified that one day her father was going to go out taking on the Klan and the inevitable was going to happen. And in her fear and her frustration, that little girl would go across the street, and when she could, she would throw rocks at the windows and she would pull bushes out of the yard. She'd do anything she could to make Mr. Monteith's life as miserable as hers was. That little girl grew up to be who we all refer to as Dr. Angela Davis. And only in a place like Dynamite Hill can you have a Ku Klux Klansman living on one side of the street and a potential Black Panther living on the other side of the street. Thank you. And I'll stop my share.
What a place to stop, Barry. Um, let's pause to see if there are any questions, and then if there aren't, Barry, maybe you have a few more minutes
Sure.
to do a few more, and then also perhaps you and Dion can preview next week's conversation as well. But we'll pause. I feel like I see some people processing too.
I definitely don't want to steer. I would love to hear any thoughts or questions, but just planting this, Barry, if it is germane to your talk about that interesting duality of Birmingham. And obviously, you referenced Angela Davis. Apologies if I jump ahead, but this same city also produced Condoleezza Rice, and they have a fascinating story as well. Just an interesting dichotomy at play there.
Yeah, when you think about Birmingham, you are producing people like Arthur Shores, and you're producing people like the Reverend William Pettiford, who created the first Black bank in Birmingham, and you have a cadre of people like Joseph Lowry, who goes on to be the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. There are just so many notable, influential individuals from the Birmingham area who have been a part of this work and moving our country forward to the place that we are today.
I have a question for you, Barry, and perhaps Dion, you can feel free to take this as well. So when we were thinking about BCRI doing this workshop, we had a couple of slots we were thinking of in terms of topic, subject matter. One was boycotts, which you talked about a little bit, Dion. Another was archives. So I'm curious, Barry, I put in the chat that you're an award-winning historian. I hope that was okay. Could you make the connection between archives and organizing for power for us, please? And you're clearly really passionate. I'd also appreciate if you could talk about that passion a bit too.
Well, I'm passionate because I've done what I do for over 30 years. But as I can see my time on the stage coming to an end, I also see the work that I've done being more important than any other time that I've done it. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I firmly believe that at this particular moment in this country's history, the lessons that Birmingham has to teach are more valuable now than they've been since the Institute has existed. The Institute was the idea of a wonderful group of activists, academics, business people that came together to provide what was referred to as something that was inspired by the past, but it was a vision for the future. And when I think of how different our country has become over the last 10, 15 years, and how marginalized people are becoming instead of actually learning to work together and live together. The lessons of Birmingham are so very instructive, and I want my children, not just my biological children, but I want my students that I've taught to live in a world that people paid for. They paid for with tears and sweat and blood, and some of them paid for it with their lives. And so when you talk about archives and you talk about the future, a person that can control the past can control the future because you set the narrative, you set the tone. And at the Institute, we have a powerful collection that is physical and digital. And I think that is so very important in today's zeitgeist, where people can actually go in and they can peruse the oral histories of people who were on the front lines in the battle for change in a place like Birmingham. You can, Mark Twain once said that you shouldn't write about a person until you know what they have for breakfast in the morning. You can actually listen to Fred Shuttlesworth talk about his motivations. You can actually listen to the different people who actually lived this history talk about what it was like to go to bed not knowing whether they were going to wake up the next morning, or to live in a community where having bombs going off regularly, like you live in a war zone, was their reality. And so we have a responsibility at the Civil Rights Institute to maintain and curate this history in such a way that people will be able to learn and benefit from it, and understand that even though we find ourselves in very contentious times, there were worse times, and people found a way to negotiate those times to bring us to where we are now.
Thank you, Barry. We have a few more minutes. And perhaps we can take this time to preview what you're going to talk about next Wednesday, and who's going to join us next Wednesday.
Mhm. Well, I do have something that is in front of me that I want to share, that I wanted to make sure in terms of time that I had the time to share with you Dynamite Hill. And incidentally, because the existence of Dynamite Hill, Birmingham nationally gets an ugly moniker as Bombingham. But what I want to share with you is, I want to share with you Birmingham's racial segregation ordinances, just a couple of them, just to see the legal footing that people stood on during this time. In Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail, he spoke about people living at a tiptoe stance. You were always on eggshells because there were so many of these laws. And then when it wasn't laws, it was the customs that drove these laws, that you had to make sure that you didn't violate any of these, because there could be legal, social, or extra legal consequences to doing that. But the first one I want to share with you, and people always kind of drop their jaw when they hear it, but it's Section 597. Negroes and white persons not to play together. Now, somebody sat down and legislated that. And it says, it should be unlawful for a Negro and a white person to play together or in company with each other in any game of cards, dice, dominoes, or checkers. Jackie Robinson comes along and joins the Brooklyn Dodgers. And this law is amended. The amendment reads, it shall be unlawful for a Negro and a white person to play together or in company with each other in any game of cards, dice, dominoes, checkers, baseball, softball, football, basketball, or similar game. Now, what's not written here, but it's important to understanding in totality, in Birmingham, it was illegal to build playgrounds for white children within 2 city blocks of a playground for children of color. Not only was it illegal for the children to play with one another, they weren't even allowed to see each other play. This commitment to exclusion drove life in Birmingham. But as I pause for more questions, it's so very important for me to say, it wasn't just Birmingham. This was a case study, but this was the way our country was. And in some corners today, this still exists. And we have to take this history, we have to take these lessons that people were able to forward in our lifetime and in our present to forward the barriers and the streams that we face currently.
Thank you, Barry. We have a question in person.
I got it. Yep.
I'm trying to find out, is there, something where Fred Shuttlesworth lived? A marker or anything?
Fred Shuttlesworth lived in an eastern part of Birmingham in an industrial area known as Collegeville. And his home and church, as I mentioned earlier, no, I didn't mention earlier, pardon me. Fred Shuttlesworth was going to integrate the buses in Birmingham on Christmas Day in the Monday after Christmas Day in 1956. His home and church were bombed on Christmas night in 1956. His home no longer exists. The bomb blew this house to the ground with him in it. As he emerged, the police were there with what they said was amazing speed, almost as if they knew something was going to happen. And he emerged from that house, and the police officer said to him, we knew they were going to do something to you, but we didn't know it was going to be like this. And Shuttlesworth responded to the police officer that he wasn't going to be run out of Birmingham. He said that he aimed to kill segregation or be killed by it. But to answer your question directly, that home no longer exists, but there is a memorial garden where his house existed, and there is a historical marker there. And his Bethel Baptist Church, which was bombed 3 times before the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, his Bethel Baptist Church has been restored. And you can visit it and you can take in the narrative of it as a part of your visit to the city of Birmingham.
Thank you, Barry. And then this will be our last question. We have one in the chat for you. Before we close out and go to our publications member team meeting. Basiona asks, could you comment on how are Black residents grappling today with the white supremacy and racism?
As I said a minute ago, I don't think that Birmingham is any different from any other part of the country. And currently, we have an assault on the history that we're talking about. When you have the Tuskegee Airmen removed from the Air Force manual, and you have the story of Jackie Robinson removed, and you have these narratives that are being marginalized. It shows you the value of your experience. And if people think that your experience is worth nothing, then they don't respect you as a person. And when you don't have personhood, then you have to push back, because that's the essence of who we actually are. And so I would say that what I say to people all the time, Birmingham is not some strange place in the Twilight Zone. Birmingham is a part of the United States of America and the wider world where these feelings and these actions exist.
Thank you, Barry. And I'll go ahead and close this out before I hand it over to Kamaria and Mary to direct the member team. Thank you so much. But just to say really quickly, we're going to have you back again, Barry, right? And you're going to talk about your legacy program,
Love to.
which is great. I think we're going to have hopefully a young person from that legacy program who will join the conversation. And then Dion, help me get the name right. We may also be joined by Kai
Frazier.
Frazier. So it's going to be jam-packed, part 2. And thank you so much, Barry. Thank you, Dion. And I'll turn it over to Kamaria, Alula, and Mary. Thank you.